Okay, it's product review time, and it's a new fermenter. This is the FastFerment. You may have seen my review for the Fast Rack, which is the bottle draining system that neatly stacks up onto itself and allows you to drain your bottles. And if you've got all the bottles the sort of same size, you can put a box on top, flip it over, and you've got your bottles straight into the box. So it's great for parties, when they're dirty and whatnot. This is from the same makers, and they've made a Conical fermenter. It's made of HDP plastic, and it's 30 litres. So I'm just going to do a review of the product. I've got a beer on the go at the moment to finish tomorrow, and I'm going to pitch that into the fermenter and take it all the way from filling it up right through to the end, to possibly even having a drink of the beer as well at the end, to kind of, summarise what I think of the product. A couple of things a little bit separate you get with it. You obviously get the FastFerment Conical and all the bits that go with it, but the extra that I've got is the thermometer and the stand to go on. You do get these wall mounting brackets, so you get like a left and a right, and on the side of the FastFerment, I'll show you, is these little threaded holes where these little bolts go in, and that will mount the Conical onto the wall in them brackets. I was going to do that. The walls in my apartment are not that strong. I didn't kind of want to risk it falling off and beer going everywhere, and so I decided to go with a stand, as it's a lot more stable. There is one other thing you can get, and it's a carrying strap. We'll have to prove how difficult it is moving it without. I mean, as it's in its empty state, it's fairly easy to move around. It's quite light, but I imagine moving that when it's quite full, with its peculiar shape, it could be quite a challenge. So I'll run you through some of the things that you get with it. You get the thermo well, which has to go into the side to accommodate the thermometer, and that's the little thermometer there, which will just go into the thermo well, and that will then screw into the side of the fermenter. Now, as you can probably see on that, there is PTFE tape, and they give you a roll of that, and they recommend that you run that over the threads of the thermo well, the bottom of the FastFerment, the hose bar, we'll get back onto that later, and the collection bottle, just to make sure that all the threads are sealed up. The one other thing that they state in the manual, this is the lid to the actual FastFerment. It's got a rubber gasket inside. They recommend to take that out and screw the lid on at least 10 times so that it kind of wears in the threads on the lid. And I can understand why that is, because when I first put the lid on, I thought that the lid had warped or the FastFerment had warped, but it's just to kind of get those threads worn in a little bit. And once you've done it those 10 times, it was fine after about 6, if I'm honest. It screws on much easier now, and the rubber gasket that goes inside it. So obviously the other thing you get is your collection ball, which is going to enable you to collect the yeast from the Conical, take it off, dump, you could either dump it out at the end, or you could harvest your yeast from this. So it's another plus point. You can buy these separately, so if you've got kind of like, a very kind of beer that's producing, chucking out lots of yeast, lots of trouble, you could switch them out, get your first one, then put a clean one on. Then your next bit is the actual valve that goes on the bottom. Now there's the big stipulation in the instructions that you should never dismantle that and clean it as it is in situ, because it invalidates your warranty. They do tell you on the website how to dismantle it, but obviously once you do dismantle it, you're not covered on their warranty. But it's quite heavy duty. It's quite a weighty bit of equipment. You get an extra little screw bit, which is like the same that's on that one. That would just screw onto that one. The idea being is I'll start screwing some of this on now. When you finish with the fermentation, you took your yeast off, you might have harvested it, you'd close it off, unscrew that, put on this one, and you can bottle directly from the FastFerment. So it enables you to ferment, collect your yeast, and bottled straight from the primary fermenter. There's a couple of things with it as well. I mean, I guess I'll get to it later on as well. I think with batch priming, you'd probably have to be careful with batch priming in this, because pouring it into that, it probably would all just sink into the conical part and wouldn't get stirred around. Then how much stirring would you want to do? I normally rack my beer onto my sugar solution in a bottling bucket and do it that way. So it might be advisable to kind of prime individual bottles rather than do it that way. They also suggest not to use anything metal on the inside, which is obviously given it could scratch the inside, and that's going to harbour some nasties. What I do like about it is, you know, it is quite easy. There's a big 6-inch opening, so you can get your hand right in there. It's easy to clean. There's no kind of real rough edges or anything in there at all. So you're going to be able to maintain it and keep it clean. That's also got a bit of tape on it. That is where the valve will go. I'll attach that in a minute. You get an airlock, a 3-piece airlock. I can get it off. So you got that bit, and then the little rubber grommet that goes on top. There's also a little black rubber grommet you have to put into the lid to take the airlock. There we go. And then your fixing bolts for your brackets, and that's pretty much it. So that will cut back once it's kind of fully assembled, and I'll run through a couple of other bits. Right, so after screwing all them little bits in, it's now fully assembled. The firmer well is in place. The firmer well seems to protrude slightly where it's in there, but it seems nice and tight, and the PTFT tape is on it. It seems tight enough. I probably will do a leak test with some water first, because I don't fancy risking filling it up with beer to find out it's going to leak later on. The only other thing I did notice, this is where you had the valve at the bottom. So you'd cap it off there, you'd unscrew it, and you have your little bottle where you can have your yeast and then kind of store it in the fridge. Now I'm sure I've seen in other videos, or maybe I'm missing one in mine, but there's a little cap. Would have been quite nice to just cap that off. I don't seem to have anything here, but I don't know, or maybe another screw top that fits that same thread to kind of screw it on. I don't know. Maybe I'm just missing it, and that's not really a design fault, but it would have been nice to add a little stopper that goes in there. My only other initial concern is, straight away before I kind of fill it up, is the stability of the fermenter when it's in the rack. Now obviously it's going to be a lot different when there's a lot of fluid in there and it's bearing weight down, but I worry that it shifts around a little bit. I just wonder if maybe this metal part on the top here should have had, I'll bring it over, maybe a little bit more of a kind of heavy duty rubber on it to kind of stabilise it a bit, more of like a thicker band. I don't know. And my one other concern I have with this so far is the transportability of it if you're on your own. That filled with 25 litres, 23 litres fluid, you're going to have to kind of hold it there, but hold the bottom as well, because you couldn't pick that up and then move the cage independently and then put that somewhere else. It'd almost be a two-man job. So I'm guessing that's kind of where the carrier strap does come in handy, because it sort of supports it on an equal level kind of thing. But I'm sure it'd be fine to transport, but it'd be worth testing it out and letting you know what it's like to remove. But I do worry that it shifts around a little bit too much on there, but we'll see. So we've got an oatmeal stout in there. Tomorrow when that's ready to go, I'll cut back to some footage of filling it up, and then we'll do like an end cap of what I think of it, any good or bad points from the whole experience. So we've got our tap in the off position for now, because we're not going to have it going into the ball just yet. I'm just going to open the tab on the boil kettle, and we should start getting our beer running in. Now it's been sanitised. I run Star San through the whole thing, cleaned all the bits out, give it a wash prior in hot water, because obviously this has come straight from the factory. There's going to be bits of residue and whatnot on it, so it's always worth giving it a good clean out. Seems fine. Right, the only things I did encounter are leaks. What I would say is when you get this fermenter is to leak test it with water. They do recommend, and they give you that PTFE tape with the kit, is to make sure that all the threads are well wrapped with the PTFE tape in the clockwise direction as they say that the threads go. Just to make sure that there are no leaks. I thought that I had that union valve, the bottom bit, done up as tight as it could go. Run a load of water in it while I was cleaning it and it was kind of pouring out the top of it. So you kind of really got to make sure that you get it nice and tight. Possibly I would say maybe wear some gloves as well when you do that, because when you're trying to sort of tighten the bottom union to the main part of the body, you're grabbing the neck, and top part of that plastic thread can be quite sharp. So the time you're gripping it and turning it, you're cutting into your hands. You might want to wear some gloves on that. It's a bit of a sharp edge on that top, but I guess it's just where it's come out of the machine. I also had leaks from the thermo well. I thought that had gone in kind of, you've got to make sure it's in square one so you don't ruin the threads completely, and also make sure it's hand tight, but it does kind of go pretty much flush to the unit, and if you don't get that in tight enough, that will also leak. Rather than fill it all up, I just filled up halfway, held it so that the main wort was bearing down on that point, and you can see where the wort was beading out of it. So again, that needed some more tape on it and a bit of retightening. Again, make sure the collection ball, that's got some PTFE tape on it, and that's nice and tight to the other part, the sort of like the clamp that holds it down kind of thing. Other than that, I think it's pretty much, well, hopefully going to be leak free. I have to say I'm a little bit paranoid, but I think they pretty much state that in the manual, once you've got all these bits on there and they're tightened up, you're good to go, and you can leave some of them bits on there, and then said every 6 months or so they recommend you take it out, give it a good clean. I guess depending on how much you've used it. I mean, if you only use it once a month, you're going to possibly get away with leaving those bits on there longer, but eventually you're going to need to kind of clean them all out and make sure that it's had a good deep clean. I would say I feel slightly sort of paranoid that some of mine are going to leak, but I think now that I've done them up tight enough, they should be alright. I might just put a bit of kitchen roll on the very bottom of the collection ball, just so that if there's any drips within the next 24 hours, we'll be able to see that where they're coming from and if it's definitely from what part. So until it comes to racking off, that's it. Right, so it's bottling night for the FastFerment fermenter. And I have to admit, I did have a little bit of grief last night, or the night before I think it was, and I was trying to rack off the last bit of sediment in the fermenter. I opened the ball up, the collection ball, and I injected a little bit of CO2 with a little CO2 sort of valve thing, and opened it up, and nothing happened. The cone, like tube and yeast, just didn't move. It just wouldn't shift. Unscrewed the lid and got the very fine end of one of my bottle brushes, just tapped it a little bit till it started to come through. I'm not sure what happened. I was going to film it, but I didn't think if anyone would be interested to see unscrewing the collection ball and putting everyone on, but I kind of wish I did now, because it would have shown that the trouble they had of getting that yeast to settle out. I do know that I think if you're going to harvest the yeast, they recommend that you let it settle out, let the tube nut go in there, undo it, then add your yeast, so you kind of got, you can collect your yeast later on. But I've let this ferment out for 2 weeks and collected it at the end. Whether that's wrong or not, I don't know. It's what I normally do in my brewing, and expected the yeast just to drop straight into the collection ball, be able to decant it off, probably 1 or 2 of them, and it'd be, it'd be fine. A lot more has settled into the ball overnight. This is the second ball to come off. There still looks like there's a little bit of sediment and yeast stuck on the side, but I'm not going to bottle this whole batch. I'm going to keg some. So the first bit of the keg might have a little bit of sediment, but that'll drop out in the keg. So I'm just going to put the valve back in, and I did have a bit of trouble, and I've got trouble again getting it off, which was, I think, where the beer, and initially it kind of creates a little bit of a sticky seal, and it's almost quite hard to free it up. And you feel like you're going to turn the valve the wrong way and you get beer everywhere. Right, so that's off. Now the next part is just literally attaching the hose and then bottling from that. But the only issue that I have found is you get this, another little attachment to screw on, but you get a length of hose, but the length of hose is ridiculous. I mean, I'm not even sure what that's good for. It's so small that even when it's on there, I'll there. I'll try and bring the camera a bit closer. You'll see if that hose was on there, how small that really is, and that's not going to stretch from your countertop to the floor. And if it was on the floor, you wouldn't be able to sort of get the right height at the bottom anyway. So I'm not even sure why they include that, because it's so tiny. I think there's the only thing you could do with that is to, if you're transferring straight into a keg, it would be fine. So I'm just going to take that off, and I've attached my own bottling hose that I use, which I've stepped down through hoses, because the other issue with that, the hose they supply has got such a big bore on it that the bottling ones, most bottling ones you get, will not fit that. So you've already got trouble. You're better off using something that you already use for bottling and attaching it with a clamp to the existing hose. So once that's on there, my bottling wand actually reaches the floor, and I'll cut back to that in a sec. So I'm just going to open the valve, the hose is attached, hopefully it's not going to leak. A little bit of a leak, there's a lot of sediment coming out there, I have to admit. Just tie the clamp up a little bit. That is slowly flowing through there now. It's very hard to get the bottom of the hose sort of at the right level that it can rack off, because it's so close to the actual surface that it kinks the hose up, which is another kind of slight issue. It'd be better if you had like a little bit of a bend on there, a 90 degree or something. Just a bit of a leak there, slow it down a little bit. Shut it off a minute and try and get the hose through the, that might help it a bit. I really want this totally off the, that's certainly a lot better. If you can just sort of get it on a corner, bring it a little bit further out, and you can get a bit more of a better run. Right, this is going to be the kind of final concluding part to the FastFerment fermenter. You might have seen the last bit of footage that I just put before this bit. I had a little bit of trouble with the bottling. What I didn't capture on camera, unfortunately, was that, you know, after I'd messed around a little bit with it, it went seamlessly. But it was just kind of the initial setup just weren't quite right. I think it was something to do with the fact of the bottling wand, when it was in the bottle, opening the tap kind of created a kind of uneven pressure that made the beer come out through the kind of the nipple part of the fermenter, and it just weren't working properly. But we got to a point where it was fine, and then, you know, you could have the tap fully open, dispense with the bottling wand straight into the bottle. But the price setup was a little bit finicky. I think possibly because, you know, it was the first time using it and whatnot. But once it was set up, it was a dream. So what I'm going to do is just run through, I think, the sort of kind of the good and bad points of the FastFerment. And then that's kind of, you know, a roundup. I was going to do a review of the beer, but I might do it on a separate video, because really we just want to know what about the fermenter and if it's good or bad. The good, I think, one of the main things is the collection ball. I think that's a fantastic little bit of equipment to be able to take that yeast off, harvest it, and then kind of reuse it. What I don't know if it's missing in my kit, but was the some sort of cap to kind of keep that sealed once it's in the fridge or wherever you're storing it. So otherwise it's just like an open top. It would be nice to have had something to go on the top of that and create a sealed unit with the yeast in it before I go and use it. But, you know, obviously you're going to probably put it into your own sanitised container straight away anyway. Maybe that's the reason they don't include one, or maybe they do and I didn't get one. The size of it was pretty good. I think the 30 litres is plenty enough for, you know, kind of your average brew, with enough kind of headspace to worry about any kind of, you know, violent ferments. It seemed just right for me. The cleanup was a breeze. You know, when it comes to cleaning up, it was very easy to kind of just, you know, stick it in the bath, fill it with sanitizer and cleaner, turn the tap off, run it through. It cleaned up really well. Then the bad points, I seem to have more bad points than I do good points, but overall I was kind of quite pleased with the unit. The one thing that got me was the hose that's included. I don't understand the length of it or why it's so short and the point of it. I'm guessing really the main thing with the FastFerment, it was been designed to go on a wall, and then the kind of stand fermenter has come out a little bit afterwards, because I've seen people using it in other videos where they've got them on the wall and they're lined up, and I guess that short hose would allow you to just go, you know, straight into kind of maybe a bottle wand that was on a, you know, sort of like a desk or something, or straight into your fermenter or your corny keg. Sorry, your corny keg rather than your fermenter. So maybe that's why it's that short, but you know, it could have been a little bit longer for my liking to enable you to just use that. And the size of the bore of it was just wrong. I just don't know if they could have maybe had like a step down hose already that would take a standardised, because most of those bottling ones are the same size. Now, you know, the thing of the FastFerment is to be able to kind of rack off from that, or at least bottle from that as well, once you took the yeast off. Why the hose doesn't accept a bottling one from the get-go, I don't know. It just seems a bit odd to me that you wouldn't include that. But you know, I had my own kind of hose that I stepped down myself, and it wasn't really a problem after that. But it might be nice to have it from the, you know, when you buy the kit, it's all there. The one thing that done me was the last of the yeast that was remaining in the conical part of it did kind of drop out right towards the end when I was bottling, which weren't too much of an issue. I think it was like when it created that last bit of the vacuum, it sucked it through. But that was good and bad in two ways. I mean, what I did like about the FastFerment was another good point, was that with a bottling bucket normally, the tap is always too high than the last bit of beer that's left, so you've got to tip it to get that last bit out when you're bottling. But with the FastFerment, because of the conical design, you get every last drop of beer out. But because all the yeast didn't drop out, whether that's because the yeast compacted too much in it, it dragged that through at the last time. So any bit that you would have saved by having the flexibility of being able to have the conical was just wasted because all the yeast pumped through. And I think that was an isolated incident. I don't think that's what happens all the time, because I'm guessing that if you can dump the yeast properly early on and have a clean fermenter, that's not really an issue. But this yeast just did not want to seem to drop out from the FastFerment. It kind of just stuck around for way too long. I mean, I left the ferment for 2 weeks. I prodded it after a while, tapped it, opened the ball, left it overnight. A little bit dropped out the next day, but it was not as much as I like. It weren't sort of as clean as it could have been. Like I say, the last 2 bottles were very murky because the last bit of yeast kind of dropped out with it. So that's kind of, it's good and bad point. It's good if you can get a clean, the yeast can drop out, but I think what might have aided it maybe, where I'm using the FastFerment at the moment, I don't have temperature control, so a cold crash might have kind of solved that situation. It might have enabled the yeast to drop into the collection ball, and we'd have got away from worrying about the last bit of the yeast. The other thing I guess is checking how watertight it is. This is probably only a once thing, like once you've done it, and then if you're doing a periodic clean with, like this after 6 months, you might want to take everything apart. The firmer well for the temperature gauge, the main part of the ferment as well, it was like you had to tighten again, because if you didn't, there were leaks. But once you got them tightened, it was fine. And I think do not underestimate the amount of the thread tape that you need. It's kind of, they do say sort of 5 or 6 times around the thread. You need plenty of it, and because you don't get watertight seal otherwise. So I guess you got to spend a little bit of time setting it up. You got to kind of think that it's not really a bad point, but I'm guessing you can't buy this unit, screw it on, and rush it and expect it to work. You've got to take the time to screw them on properly with the thread tape, otherwise you're going to get leaks. And leaks with water is fine, but leaks with beer is bad news. It's just a mess. And even when I thought I had everything tight, you can see, like, because it was a darker beer, you could see it sort of beading ever so slowly down it, and there was like a streak running down. A little bit more tightening. You're always ever worried about tightening too much, but it needed it in some cases, and eventually it was leak free and it worked fine. And I guess once you've got to that point, you're not really going to undo some of them fittings until you want to have a real deep clean of the unit. So it's not a major issue, but it's something to be aware of if you buy one, that you've got to tighten those threads up properly, or you're in for a bit of pain. The other odd thing I find in the instructions is that it says that there's too much headspace to do smaller batches, which I find, I don't know, unusual. I've used big fermenters before for small batches and not found it an issue. They say you shouldn't brew anything less than the kind of 23 litres. I don't understand why. One issue I did have, which wasn't really an issue for me, is that the airlock never seemed to bubble with my one. I thought I had everything airtight. The lid has a rubber seal in it, that was on tight, but I never got activity in the airlock. I knew it was fermenting because there was the Kreuzen was in the top of the fermenter. You could see that it had activity. The gravity dropped. Everything pointed towards the ferment being totally finished, and obviously it did ferment, but I never had airlock activity. So whether it just weren't quite sealed totally at some point. And that brings me onto the lid. The lid is quite irritating to the point that you kind of need both hands on it to turn it off. I think, and the little indentation in the top, like some of the Australian fermenters where you can unscrew it with one hand, would have been fantastic, because the airlock is offset to the side. That's not in the centre. There's enough room to put a little recess in there for handle, enough just into the plastic to be able to turn it with one hand would be excellent, because sometimes you got your steriliser in one hand, you might have, I don't know, it would just be easier because you're doing that to kind of turn it, and just to make things easier, I think. I think that's pretty much it. The other thing is probably, I would say it's possibly quite cumbersome, getting it up onto the area where I was bottling. You got to lift that weight, and you're lifting the sort of like the stand with it as well. Whereas again, it does sort of, is it unfair to say it's a bad point because this has been designed as well to be mounted on the wall? I guess you'd have it on a wall. You could even mount it, I guess, inside a cooling area and bottle straight from that, and it'd all be set up. So kind of when you're using the stand, it's kind of like a, how can I say it? It's like, I guess it's intended to be used like that because they sell the stand, but you're making it harder for yourself, and that comes the same when you see in the bottling video where that you kind of got to get it on a corner of a surface to allow that hose to come through. There's no 90-degree bend there, otherwise the hose is hitting straight down onto a countertop, and you just don't get the flow, and you just, that was just hassle. That just, on bottling day you want it to be smooth, and it works so well when then you've got the downward pressure of all the fluid coming down into the thing. It's fantastic, but just initially getting it set up right was a little bit awkward. I think maybe, I don't know if they could design it with a little 90-degree attachment on the end so it comes out. I don't know, would that stop? I don't know, that's the only thing I can think of. Obviously when it's mounted on the wall it's perfect. I just could not trust the walls in my flat to support it. It was just too much aggro. Other than that, I do still think it's a great product. I love that it's very durable. It's hard plastic, and it seems like it's indestructible, and I can't see it kind of just breaking. Obviously when it's empty, it's easy to move around, it's easy to clean. I love the fact that it takes every last bit of the fluid out. I mean, I obviously think with a better cooling temperature to kind of get the yeast to drop out and a cleaner yeast, that would have been fantastic to get that last bit. I'm always kind of standing there on the countertop trying to tip the bucket with this. None of that, because it's all feeding through to that kind of conical bottom. That was fantastic. I love the temperature gauge, that worked accurately. I tested against another temperature. Being able to see the temperature on your fermenter is fantastic. Not having to open it up to see what's going on, was great. I do believe they are introducing like a little sampling port where you can draw a bit of beer off, or wort rather, before it's beer, just to see that if the gravity is changing. So that you haven't got to open the top of the fermenter. And again, without that kind of that attachment on the lid or like a recess in it is a pain to kind of open. So that would be a welcomed addition. Other than that, that's pretty much it. It's solid. It's good. I mean, to be fair, I think we've got a point now in the home brewing where you can get these kind of conical things which were never available to home brewers before. It's kind of what your commercial brewers had. So from that perspective, to be able to get a kind of all-in-one set. Obviously, with my set, had the stand and the temperature gauge, which is extra. You don't get that as a standard, but pretty much everything you get is in the kit. You get the brackets to mount it on the wall. All I think they really need to do is maybe a better lid to unscrew and a longer hose. That hose don't cost nothing to make longer, and it is sound. It's it's an excellent addition to your brewery. So that's it from me. Cheers.